Imagine an idyllic childhood, 2 loving parents, lots of brothers and sisters, friends over all the time. Imagine those parents guiding their children into adulthood and welcoming some grandchildren. Everything seems to be going perfectly until it's not. One of those parents, now grandparents, starts to forget the most basic things, the location of everyday items, people's names. They become disoriented in usually familiar surroundings. A diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is made, and it's the beginning of the end. Sadly, versions of this story play out across Australia every day. I believe that does not need to be the case. Today, I'm going to bust 3 myths about Alzheimer's disease that you may currently believe. It's my hope that by busting these myths, you'll become empowered to take control of your cognitive health. I'm also going to give you 7 things you can work on in your life to help keep your mind sharp or make it even sharper. Because while I wish for you a long lifespan, that is, years that you stay alive, I also wish for you a long brain span, years that your brain functions well. Ultimately, my hope for you is that your brain span matches your lifespan. Before I go into that, let me give you a quick summary about Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's dementia. The brains of people with Alzheimer's disease contain within them a specifically folded protein called amyloid that clumps together to form amyloid plaques. Amyloid plaques are present in the brain for over a decade before any cognitive symptoms occur, but most people who have amyloid plaque will go on to develop cognitive decline. First decline that's only obvious to that person, but then when it's detectable by doctors, a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment or early Alzheimer's disease can be made. If the disease continues to the point where that person can no longer look after themselves, the additional diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia can be made. There are other forms of dementia, but by far the most common form that's diagnosed is Alzheimer's dementia, something else I believe does not need to be the case. Myth number 1, that if Alzheimer's disease is in my family or if I have the gene, then I'm probably going to get Alzheimer's disease. I know a lot of people have witnessed a family member decline with Alzheimer's disease, and I know a lot of people can't help but ask themselves if the same fate is in store for them. While there is a gene that's highly associated with Alzheimer's disease, this gene only confers risk. It is far from a crystal ball. Half of the people that have this gene do not go on to get Alzheimer's disease, and fully a third of people with Alzheimer's disease do not have this gene. You might have heard of the analogy that applies here. Genetics slows the gun, environment pulls the trigger. It's the environment that we expose this gene to that determines how it behaves. So if it's possible to get Alzheimer's disease with or without the gene, you could be forgiven for thinking that the gene doesn't even matter, that it's just something that happens as we get older, which leads me to myth number 2, that cognitive decline and dementia is a normal part of ageing. Let's consider for a moment a few other organs. If the heart had trouble carrying out its function, had trouble meeting its demand, cardiologists would call that heart failure and they would intervene. If the kidneys had trouble carrying out their function, had trouble meeting their demand, nephrologists would call that renal failure and they would intervene. If the brain has trouble carrying out its function, has trouble meeting its demand, why would we call that normal? Cognitive decline is no more normal than heart failure or renal failure. It might be common, but that does not make it normal. I'm not saying we can't have the occasional slip up, have trouble remembering someone's name or finding a word, but when those occurrences become commonplace, it can be a sign that the brain is having trouble carrying out its function. It's having trouble meeting its demand. It's also a sign that now is the time to act. So often though, people don't act, even when they know that their brain is not functioning as well as it used to, because they mistakenly believe myth number 3, that there's nothing that can be done. So many people believe that if cognitive decline has started, that it's too late. But nothing could be further from the truth. We now have robust clinical evidence that cognitive decline can be halted and in many cases reversed. The key is to identify a person's root causes. much like we would do when investigating heart failure or renal failure. We know an awful lot about what the brain needs to function at its best. And we know an awful lot about what conditions put extra strain and extra demand on the brain. And when that knowledge is applied, people can get better. So what are the things to do? Here are the 7 things you can work on to help keep your brain sharp or make it sharper. The things you can work on to increase the chance of your brain span matching your lifespan. Number 1 is to eat real food. The molecules that you eat become the molecules in your body. Make them quality. The brain needs adequate amounts of quality fat. That's the main constituent of the brain. The brain thrives on a diet that's low in carbohydrate and sugar and moderate in protein. There are direct communication pathways between the gut and the brain, so the brain functions well on a diet that supports healthy gut function. What's just as important as what we eat is when we eat. Some gentle fasting of just 12 hours overnight gives the body a chance to process all the food that we eat during the day. It also gives all the cells of the body, including those of the brain, a chance to go through a deep cleaning cycle that they can't do when we've eaten. Thing number 2 is to support muscle. Strong muscles send signals to the brain that we're healthy, thriving, and that it's worth investing resources into the brain. To support muscle, we have to use them. That's aerobic things like walking, swimming, and riding, but even better in short, sharp bursts. And then, of course, resistance training, which is code for weights. But a lot of people start with their own body weight. Muscles also need an adequate source of protein. So that's an adequate dietary intake of protein, like I mentioned a minute ago. The third thing to work on is to prioritise sleep. During deep sleep, the brain literally washes itself, washing away leftover chemicals from the day before. It's also a time when the brain reinforces connections between neurons and it makes new connections. The best amount of time to aim for is 7 to 8 hours. Number 4 is to incorporate a daily meditative practice. Meditation turns on powerful protective genes in the whole body, including in the brain. Number 5 is to keep learning. The brain's constantly growing new neurons, but those baby neurons, they need a job to do or they die. Give your baby neurons a job. Number 6 is to avoid toxins and to enhance the body's natural detoxification pathways because they weaken as we age. By toxins, I mean heavy metals. These can be found in metal dental fillings, some seafood. I mean certain pesticides and herbicides. And I mean mycotoxins. These are chemicals that are made by mould. They make them to protect their real estate. These toxins can build up in the body over a lifetime of even micro-exposure. And they're poison for the brain. Number 7 is to supplement with extracts that have been shown to support the brain and with micronutrients where the diet might be deficient. Things like curcumin, lion's mane, ashwagandha, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids. Number 7 is also to aim for blood markers that are optimal, the best for the brain, not just numbers that are average or normal. Markers like homocysteine, fasting insulin, vitamin D, cholesterol, inflammatory markers, hormones. In a clinical trial that put all of these elements together, the results of which were published in a peer-reviewed scientific publication, 84% of people improved in cognitive function despite a diagnosis of early Alzheimer's disease after 6 months. Some of those people back to a level of functioning that would be considered disease-free. A different group of scientists repeated the protocol and in their publication, also published in a peer-reviewed scientific publication, showed that 50% of people improved in cognitive function, again despite a diagnosis of early Alzheimer's disease after 6 months. Anecdotally, thousands now around the world have improved in cognitive function or staved off cognitive decline. You'll recall that I mentioned that amyloid plaques are present in the brain for at least a decade before cognitive decline sets in. That means that our window of opportunity within which to act is really wide. We even have a blood test now in Australia which can accurately predict the presence of amyloid plaque in the brain so that people can get a real sense of their risk. Even if cognitive decline has started, these studies show us that there is time to act with a real chance of recovery. I wish I knew that a few years ago. The story I started off with about an idyllic childhood. I was one of those friends over all the time. I wish I knew about all this so I could have helped the father of one of my best friends. Sadly, I found out too late for him. My hope, though, is it's not too late for me and for you and for your loved ones. Now, I know 7 things to work on sounds like a lot. It can be overwhelming. But please consider this. One of the lead researchers on one of those clinical trials I quoted, she said that of all the people who improved in cognitive function, not one of them did all 7 perfectly. We don't need to do all 7 things perfectly. We just need to do the right ones enough. So please pick one of those 7 and work on it, and then add another and add another. Because what's at stake here are your memories, it's your personality, your ability to think, your ability to have your brain span match your lifespan. And I don't know about you, but I think that's worth fighting for. Thank you.